Time has been flying by so quickly this year, it's kind of freaking me out, and I haven't made a YouTube video in a while, but I have read some pretty good books so far this year. So here are some of my mid-year book superlatives. As for what these book superlatives will entail, I am honestly going off pure vibes. So some of these superlatives will be more generic, maybe something like best audiobook or best debut book of the year, while others will be a little bit more specific. But these are just books that I wanted honestly to have an excuse to talk about. So without further ado, let's get into it. So for most likely to become your next Dark Academia obsession, I have Katabasis by R.F. Kuang. And I know I have previously made an entire video about this, but since now at the time that I'm posting this video, this book will be out, I'm going to be talking about it again. So Katabasis by R.F. Kuang is a philosophical Dark Academia fantasy, and I would say it was probably one of the most anticipated releases, if not the most anticipated release of 2025. But this is, I would say, like a part love story, part mythological and literary odyssey, and part critique of the hellscape that is academia. This follows two graduate students, Alice and Peter, who must set aside their rivalries and journey to hell to save the soul of their professor, perhaps at the cost of their own. I was very lucky to have had the chance to read an advanced copy of this book back in January, so it's been quite a few months since I first read it, and in that time I think I've grown to appreciate some other aspects of the book that I wasn't able to talk about in my previous video that I did want to talk about now. The first thing I wanted to say about this book is just the fact that this is a true Dark Academia book. I feel like in the past 2 to 3 years, and actually especially over the past few months with fall coming up, I've been seeing a lot of books marketed as Dark Academia, and then I read the synopsis or I read the book and it's just not Dark Academia. Like, it's just like a story set at a school, or it's just like some story with gothic elements. But Katabasis, I think, embodies two main pillars of the Dark Academia genre. One, the hunger for knowledge, and two, a critique of academic systems and the social structures that often arise within. It also just is like a very academic book to read, which kind of brings me to my next point. Reading Katabasis was really just like a learning experience in itself because there are so many references to various literary and mythological texts and figures and events. I feel like whenever I came across something that I wasn't familiar with, I would go straight to Google and then I would go down a rabbit hole on this thing, and I ended up leaving this book with a lot of new knowledge that I didn't previously have. And I just think it's really cool whenever you come across a book that inspires you to learn and appreciate new cultures and new topics. Another thing I wanted to talk about was just how this final edition looks. I know a lot of people were very interested in like the design of the book itself. I know some people were confused by the cover art, but I promise you it makes sense when you read the book. And actually looking at it in person, like the art style is a lot more intricate and detailed than I thought. The book itself also has these end papers. Kind of has like this handwriting effect, but these are all like formulas and topics that were discussed within the book. So it's really cool to see how that's being adapted into the design of the physical book itself. But we have some more of that on the back as well. And then we also do have art on the naked hardcover. It is just the same art as the front cover, but without the text. And my favorite part is the stenciled edges. I really could not tell how much detail there was just looking at pictures online. And the thing I love most about the design is the quote, "Hell is other people," which I do believe is a direct reference to Sartre's existentialist French play, No Exit. So yes, I do absolutely think this will be your next obsession if you're someone who likes the Dark Academia genre. But even if you're someone who's never read the Dark Academia genre, or you're not familiar with R.F. Kuang's work, this is at its heart a book about appreciating the small moments in life and the magic of simply existing, which I think is a message that all of us need to be reminded of from time to time. So romantasy is a genre that is hit or miss for me. Sometimes I love it, sometimes I hate it, and I've been looking for like a really good medieval romantasy, and Paladin's Grace just gave me everything I wanted in that aspect. It was funny, it was heartwarming, and you know what? It also had like this layer of depth I wasn't expecting. I think largely because one of the main characters, he's like this broken paladin who worshipped the god who died, and he's really struggling in the aftermath of this event to figure out who he is as a person and what his purpose is. And that aspect of this character really just made this story come alive for me. The other main character in this book is a perfumer named Grace, and she is a fugitive who also has a really interesting backstory. She's trying to escape her past, she's struggling with her sense of self-worth, but when she and this paladin named Stephen meet each other, they just find hope and comfort. And I just love a good romantasy book that makes you feel warm and hopeful, and that's exactly what this book did. Was the plot more predictable? Yes, I would say it was, but I just didn't care because I was having the time of my life rooting for these characters. And I have read some other of T. Kingfisher's books before, and I wasn't the biggest fan. Notably, A Sorceress Comes to Call and What Moves the Dead. So I wasn't super sure if I was gonna like this book when I picked it up, but I loved it. It's also the first book in a series. I believe there are 3 more books, and I cannot wait to dive into those. My most memorable read of the year so far would have to go to The Buffalo Hunter by Stephen Graham Jones. Now, I am someone who has never read any of Stephen Graham Jones' books before. I'm not a big horror reader, but I picked up this one because I was really intrigued by the premise and also by the cover. Rooted in the real Mariah's massacre of the Blackfeet of 1870, The Buffalo Hunter is this brutal and bloody tale of revenge that follows an indigenous vampire who haunts the fields of the Blackfeet reservation seeking justice. The revenge arc in this book is so unflinching. Like, Stephen Graham Jones did not hold back. Like, every time I was like, wait, that's not gonna happen. Like, he's not gonna go there. He did go there, and I will say it was just a very, very satisfying arc to see from beginning to end. This book also featured the most unique depiction of vampires in any form of media I've come across, which is saying a lot because I consumed a lot of vampire media in my teenage years. I can't really talk about what those unique characteristics are because they are kind of a spoiler, so you'll have to read it to find out yourself. I also really appreciated the historical aspect of this book. Like I mentioned earlier when I was talking about it, this is rooted in a real massacre that happened in American history, and this was a massacre I had never heard about before reading this story. It was kind of just glossed over in the American history textbooks, but I think it is really incredible and important that this book brought more attention to that historical event. But I would just highly recommend this book, whether or not you've read horror before. Like I said, I'm not a big horror reader myself. I still found so much to appreciate in this one, and I will be checking out more of Stephen Graham Jones' works. For my most disappointing read of the year so far, it does kind of pain me to say this, but it was The Bone Season by Samantha Shannon. And I do want to say it's not like I thought it was a horrible book. Like, I still gave it 3 stars, but it just was my biggest disappointment because I thought it was going to be like an easy 5-star read. I thought this was going to be one of my favorite series of all time based on the premise, and it just did not give me what I wanted it to give me. The Bone Season is the first book of a dystopian fantasy series that's set in 2059, and it follows a young girl named Paige who is a clairvoyant and also holds like a pretty high rank in the criminal underworld. And Paige is also like a very rare and formidable type of clairvoyant. She's known as a dream walker. And when Paige is arrested for murder, she has to use every skill at her disposal and trust someone who ought to be her enemy to survive and escape. But I think my biggest issue with this book was just how flat the characters felt. Like, there wasn't really any dimension to them that I felt like brought them to life. So in turn, I was having a very hard time getting invested in the story, even though there were elements of world building that I found interesting or aspects of the plot that I was intrigued by. I have heard the series gets better with each book, but I haven't really decided if I want to give it another try. If you're someone who feels strongly about this series, please do let me know. But yeah, overall, it was just such a massive disappointment to me because I really thought it was going to be a 5 or 6-star read. So my favorite audiobook of the year so far has been Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir, and this audiobook was just so engaging, so exciting, so immersive, and the book itself is the perfect blend of warmth, humor, and science. So Project Hail Mary is about this astronaut who wakes up on a spaceship alone. He has no recollection of why or how he got there, and I think that's all I will tell you about the plot because a lot of people do consider this a book you best go into blind. That being said, if you're someone who's interested in the movie adaptation starring Ryan Gosling, I would avoid the trailer if you haven't seen it already because there is like a big reveal in the trailer that a lot of people consider to be a massive spoiler. I think you could kind of infer it if you read the synopsis of the book, but still, if you want to be safe and go into blind, I would avoid that trailer until you read the book. But Project Hail Mary was just a book that moved me in unexpected ways. Like, I was someone who went into blind. I knew really nothing about this book except for the fact that it was set in space. But by the end of this book, I was tearing up. I was feeling so warm and fuzzy inside, and this is just a really beautiful tale of hope and humanity and friendship. The audiobook also just adds a lot to the reading experience because you have different voices for different characters, you have sound effects, and the dialogue is definitely like a strong point in the writing of this book. So being able to actually hear the dialogue and hear how these characters are interacting is just a really, really cool experience. This is a standalone science fiction book, and I will say if you're someone who's never read science fiction before, I do think this is a pretty solid place to start because the science in this book is pretty accessible and the writing itself is just very digestible. But I am so excited for this movie adaptation. I think Ryan Gosling was an amazing pick for the main character. I'm so excited to see what he does with the story, and if you want to read the story first before watching the movie, I would highly recommend the audiobook. For the best book from a debut author in 2025 so far, I have House of the Beast by Michelle Wong. I'm a sucker for a tragic story. I'm also a sucker for a good standalone book, and this was a very good standalone tragic fantasy. So this is a dark fantasy book about a young woman who strikes a deal with a mysterious and alluring god to seek revenge on her aristocratic family. I would say it's like the perfect blend of eldritch horror, Asian-inspired world building, family politics, and twisted toxic love. It blends elements of vengeance, codependency, and obsession, and I will say several of these characters gave off off like tragic anime protagonist vibes. And if you're someone who really likes like darker animes or animes like Full Metal Alchemist, I think you'll find a lot to enjoy in this book as well. One thing I thought was really unique about this book is that it features illustrations done by the author, and it's just really cool to be able to imagine like these characters and plot moments exactly the way the author imagined. Like, how many times do you get to read a book where the author is the illustrator and you know like nothing was lost in translation, whether the author was like commissioning art or if it was just fan art done by the fans? You just get to see what was in the author's mind, and I think there is something so special about that. Michelle Wong, who is the author, was also the illustrator of the Legend of Korra graphic novels, and I just loved the art style. This book definitely had me tearing up by the end. I was really crashing out like during some of the final chapters, and I'm so excited to see what Michelle Wong does next because I think this is a very, very solid debut book. For best sequel of the year, I'm gonna have to give it to The Strength of the Few by James Islington, and this is the sequel to The Will of the Many. I will say The Will of the Many was a 4.5-star read for me. I really loved it overall, but for like the first 60 to 70% of the book, my rating was honestly hovering at about 3.75 stars. I was having a lot of issues with the pacing. I was also having some issues with the main character. I felt like he was suffering a little bit too much from like the golden boy syndrome, but a lot of the issues that I felt in The Will of the Many, I feel like have really been improved upon in The Strength of the Few. I am also only halfway through this book right now, so maybe I'll eat my words, but I did really want to include it in this video, and today was filming day, so here we are. For those unfamiliar with The Will of the Many, which is the first book of the series, this follows a young fugitive who uncovers layered mysteries and world-changing secrets at this elite academy. The world that the book is set in is inspired by the Roman Republic, and there's a lot of action, political intrigue, as well as heartwarming friendships in the series. So The Will of the Many ended on an absolutely brutal cliffhanger, and The Strength of the Few kind of picks up right there. While The Will of the Many follows kind of a single narrative, this is split into 3 separate storylines. For those of you who have read Will of the Many, you can probably guess what those 3 storylines are, but otherwise I will not say anything more about that. But having those 3 separate storylines, I feel like really help with some of the pacing issues that I was experiencing in The Will of the Many. I think just the nature of multiple storylines helps, because maybe one storyline is moving kind of slowly, but another might be moving very engagingly and very quickly. And I do feel the momentum from all 3 of these storylines, and it feels like the story is moving forward at a natural pace. I also really love some of the new aspects of the world building that we were able to get in this book, and I found this so fascinating, the way that everything has been kind of fitting together in the puzzle. But yeah, like I said, I haven't actually finished the book yet, but from the first half, this is off to a very, very promising start. But that's all I have for today. There honestly were a couple of books I really enjoyed this year that I didn't get to talk about in this video, notably a lot of Joe Abercrombie's books. Best Served Cold was one that was a full 5-star read for me. I also loved The Devils, which came out this year. And I also read quite a few literary fiction books that I enjoyed, most notably Human X by Hong Kang and Martyr by Kaveh Akbar. Hopefully I'll get to touch on those books in another video. I honestly just don't have the stamina to record and edit YouTube videos. I don't really know how YouTubers are doing it. I feel like TikTok videos are so much easier and faster to crank out, so that's what I've been doing mostly. But I will be trying harder to be more active on YouTube, and autumn is coming up. That's my favorite season in general, and also just for reading, and I do feel like I'll have a lot of content ideas by then. But until then, I hope all of you guys have been enjoying your summers. Let me know what your favorite book has been, and hopefully we'll get to chat soon.